cut every one of those eyesore lines. Community property must be cleared.
That's what the HOA president told her husband's tree clearance foreman through the open window of her Lincoln Navigator on a Thursday morning in August. The lines were 70,000-volt transmission feeders carrying electricity to her own subdivision. The crew was Crowfoot Lineworks LLC, owned by her husband Renton. The foreman gave the cut order at 11:47 a.m. By 11:48, 380 Big Timber Electric customers had lost power, including all 120 homes in Crooked Creek Estates. By 11:49, my son Keld at our SCADA desk had pulled the live video feed and recognized the Crowfoot crew. Vivian Crowfoot did not yet know that Big Timber Electric and Power Company had been founded by my grandfather in 1947, and that her family had been billing my utility for fraudulent vegetation services for 4 years. Tell me below, what would you do? The Osterman place sits on the south side of the Yellowstone River in Sweetgrass County, Montana, 4 miles west of Big Timber, on a section line road called Crazy Mountain Lane that ran cattle wagons to the Northern Pacific stockyards when my grandfather, Sverre Osterman, came to the valley in 1937. 640 acres of irrigated hay meadow, sage flat, and the lower foothills of the Crazy Mountains. The ranch headquarters sits on a low rise above the river. The transmission line corridor, 3 high-voltage feeders carrying 70,000 volts from the Yellowstone substation north toward the Crazy Mountain Range, runs east-west across the southern 15 acres of the parcel, under a recorded utility easement dated November of 1947. My grandfather Sverre Osterman did not just settle this valley. He electrified it. In 1947, with the assistance of a small federal Rural Electrification Administration loan, and the savings from 9 years of working transmission line construction in eastern Washington, my grandfather founded Big Timber Electric and Power Company. He strung the first 22 miles of distribution line himself, with 2 cousins, in the summer of 1948. He died in 1973 at age 66. He left the company to my father Bjorn. My grandfather Sverre's first line crossed the Yellowstone River. On a 58-foot cedar pole he set into the riverbank with the help of 3 Northern Pacific Railroad crewmen who had given him a Friday afternoon off in exchange for a case of Sweetgrass County hard apple cider. The pole is still in the ground. It is the only original 1948 pole still standing on the Big Timber Electric and Power Company distribution map. I climb it twice a year to inspect the conductor termination. The last time I climbed it was 3 weeks before the August 14th predicate. The wood was sound, the hardware was clean. My grandfather had set the pole himself with a single hand-cranked auger and a willow bark guideline his mother had braided for him in Norway in 1907. I'm Orrin Osterman. I'm 58. My father ran the company from 1973 to 2015. I have been the chief executive officer and majority owner of Big Timber Electric and Power Company since my father's retirement in 2015. I came up through the line crews. I made journeyman lineman in 1989. I ran SCADA operations from 1998 to 2013. I made chief operating officer in 2008 and chief executive officer in 2015. I hold a current Montana Master Electrician license and a current registration as a Montana Professional Electrical Engineer. Big Timber Electric and Power Company serves 380 residential and commercial customers across Sweetgrass County and adjacent portions of Stillwater and Park counties. The company maintains 400 miles of distribution line and a SCADA control center staffed 24 hours a day. My wife Frida is 56. She is the company's chief operating officer. We have 1 daughter and 1 son. Our daughter Ingrid is 28. She is a journeyman lineman with the company. Our son Keld is 25. He runs the day shift at the SCADA control center. He has been operating SCADA for the company since 2022. In the spring of 2018, a development company called Crooked Creek Properties broke ground on a 120-home luxury subdivision on the section directly south of our family ranch. They paved over what had been Pfluger Brothers cattle pasture for 90 years. They called the development Crooked Creek Estates at Big Timber. In 2021, a 53-year-old woman named Vivian Crowfoot took over the Crooked Creek Estates HOA presidency. She drove a pearl white Lincoln Navigator with a vanity plate that read VIVC. Her husband Renton owned a regional company called Crowfoot Lineworks, LLC. The company specialized in tree clearance and right-of-way maintenance for rural electric utility transmission corridors across south-central Montana. Crowfoot Line Works had a current contract with Big Timber Electric and Power Company. I had personally signed it in April of 2022. It was the last contract I would sign with Renton Crowfoot. Vivian Crowfoot wrote her first letter to me in October of 2021. The letter, on Crooked Creek Estates HOA letterhead, politely requested that Big Timber Electric and Power Company consider relocating the overhead transmission infrastructure on the recorded utility easement to an underground configuration in order to restore unobstructed Crazy Mountain View corridors for Crooked Creek Estates community members. I wrote her a polite letter back, declining the request. I explained that the November 1947 utility easement on the southern 15 acres of the Osterman Ranch had been granted in perpetuity in exchange for a one-time consideration paid by Big Timber Electric and Power Company to my grandfather in the amount of $1. I explained that relocation of overhead transmission feeders to underground configuration would cost approximately $4.7 million per mile, and that the 3-mile run of the southern corridor would therefore cost approximately $14 million. I explained that the cost would, under Montana Public Service Commission rules, be borne by Big Timber Electric and Power Company's 380 customers, including the 120 households of Crooked Creek Estates, through a temporary rate adjustment estimated at approximately $190 per month per household over 48 months. I asked her whether the Crooked Creek Estates HOA would prefer to bear the relocation cost itself. I did not receive a response. In April of 2022, I signed a routine annual vegetation management contract with Renton Crowfoot's company, Crowfoot Line Works LLC. The contract called for Crowfoot Line Works to perform required tree clearance maintenance on Big Timber Electric and Power Company's distribution corridors across Sweetgrass County at a fixed rate of $240 per mile per year. The contract was the same vegetation management contract I had signed with Renton's father's company every April since 2014. Renton had inherited Crowfoot Line Works from his father in 2019. I had no reason, in April of 2022, to think the contract would become anything other than routine. In June of 2023, Vivian Crowfoot's monthly HOA newsletter, the Crooked Creek Estates Community Voice, began publishing a recurring line item under Quarterly Community Maintenance Expenditures. The line item read, Vegetation Management Around Community Power Infrastructure, $4,000 monthly, Crowfoot Line Works LLC. I did not see the newsletter at the time. I was not a Crooked Creek resident. I had no reason to be reading HOA newsletters. But Frida saw it. Frida, in addition to being our chief operating officer, had been a Crooked Creek Estates resident from 2019 to 2024 because we had purchased a small lot inside the development as a Big Timber Electric and Power Company satellite engineering office. The office was staffed 3 days a week by one of our junior engineers. Frida visited it weekly. Frida received the Crooked Creek Estates Community Voice in her satellite office mailbox. She read the June 2023 issue at our kitchen table on a Saturday morning. She set the newsletter down beside her coffee. She said, Orrin, Big Timber Electric and Power does our own vegetation management on the Crooked Creek Estates lateral. We have done it ourselves since 1971. We do not pay Crowfoot Line Works for any work inside the HOA boundary. Crowfoot Line Works does not have any contract with us that covers Crooked Creek Estates infrastructure. I looked at the newsletter. The line item was clear. The HOA was paying Crowfoot Line Works $4,000 a month for vegetation management around community power infrastructure that Big Timber Electric and Power Company was actually performing for free as part of routine utility service. I asked Frida how long the line item had been in the newsletter. She said, 2 issues, June and the previous April. I asked her to bring me every Crooked Creek Estates Community Voice issue back to January of 2021. She brought the binder of issues to the kitchen table that evening. The line item, Vegetation Management Around Community Power Infrastructure, $4,000 monthly, Crowfoot Line Works LLC, first appeared in the August 2021 issue. It had appeared in every quarterly issue since. Renton Crowfoot's company had been billing the Crooked Creek Estates HOA $4,000 a month for 2 years for work it was not performing. Work that Big Timber Electric and Power Company was actually performing for free. Total fraudulent billing to date, June 2023, $96,000. Vivian Crowfoot's HOA had been writing the checks to her husband's company. I asked Frida to make a copy of the newsletter binder. I did not yet contact anyone. I wanted to see if the pattern would continue. It did. Between June of 2023 and January of 2025, Renton Crowfoot's company continued to bill the Crooked Creek Estates HO of $4,000 a month for vegetation management work that Big Timber Electric and Power Company was performing for free. Vivian Crowfoot continued to authorize the payments. The Crooked Creek Estates Community Voice continued to publish the line item every quarter. Frida continued to bring me the newsletter every issue. By January of 2025, the cumulative fraudulent billing across the 41-month period was $164,000. I did not yet have legal standing to act. The fraud was occurring between Crowfoot Lineworks LLC and the Crooked Creek Estates HOA. Neither party had directly defrauded Big Timber Electric and Power Company. The Crooked Creek Estates HOA members, who were paying the inflated dues that funded the fraudulent vegetation contract, were the actual victims. I needed a Crooked Creek Estates member to bring the complaint forward. In February of 2025, that member arrived. Her name was Roisin Pruitt. She was 66 years old. She had been a Crooked Creek Estates resident since the development opened in 2019. She was a retired Montana State University agricultural extension agent. She had served on the Crooked Creek Estates HOA Budget Committee from 2020 to 2022 before being asked to step down by Vivian Crowfoot for what Vivian had described in a letter as incompatible budget oversight philosophy. Roisin Pruitt knew the line item in the newsletter was a fiction. She drove out to Big Timber Electric and Power Company's headquarters on Main Street in Big Timber at 3 in the afternoon on Friday, February 21st. She asked to speak with me. I met her in the company conference room. She brought a manila folder containing 41 months of HOA budget statements, every quarterly Crooked Creek Estates Community Voice issue from 2021 to date, and her own handwritten notes from her time on the budget committee. She walked me through what she knew. The $4,000 monthly Crowfoot Lineworks invoice had first appeared on the Crooked Creek Estates HOA budget in August of 2021, 3 months after Vivian Crowfoot had assumed the HOA presidency. The line item had been added to the budget by Vivian personally, without a standing budget committee vote, and had been ratified retroactively at the September 2021 Budget Committee meeting over Roisin's objection. Roisin had been the only no vote. She had been asked to step down 4 months later. She had been waiting to bring the case forward since. She told me she would testify in writing, on the record, in court, anywhere. I told her my attorney would be in touch the following week. I also told her, with her permission, that I would not yet share her testimony with state or federal authorities. I told her I wanted to wait until the pattern was complete enough that her testimony would land at the moment of maximum disruption to Vivian and Renton Crowfoot. She told me she understood. She drove home. That evening, I sat with Frida at our kitchen table. I told her about Roisin. Frida said, "Oren, we have the documentation now. We have the witness now. What are we waiting for?" I told her I was waiting for one more thing. I told her I was waiting for Vivian to escalate against the power lines themselves. I told her that Vivian had been writing letters about relocating the overhead transmission feeders since 2021, that she had been billing fraudulent vegetation management for 41 months, and that the pattern was building towards something physical. I told Frida that when Vivian escalated against the actual lines, the federal jurisdiction would activate, because deliberate interference with utility transmission infrastructure was a federal crime under Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1366, and that the case against Vivian and Renton would land in the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Montana within 48 hours. Frida sat with that for a long moment. She said, "Oren, how sure are you that she will escalate?" I told her that on April 3rd, the day the Crooked Creek Estates HOA filed its annual community improvement plan with Sweetgrass County for review, the plan had included a notation under Future Community Beautification Initiatives that referenced potential coordination with right-of-way contractors regarding visual infrastructure modification. The notation was vague. The notation was not vague enough. She would escalate. I needed her to do it on a Thursday morning when Keld was at the SCADA desk and our transmission line monitoring cameras were live. She would do it on August 14th. In March of 2025, Frida and our daughter Ingrid started a systematic review of Big Timber Electric and Power Company's 6-year transmission line outage records. The trigger had been a casual remark Ingrid had made over dinner the previous week. Ingrid had been on a repair crew that replaced 1,600 feet of copper transmission line in northern Stillwater County the previous Friday. The line had been reported as weather damage by a Crowfoot Lineworks crew on a routine inspection 2 weeks earlier. Ingrid had climbed the pole. She had cut out the damaged section for inspection. She had noticed that the cut on the copper line had been made cleanly with a hydraulic cable cutter, not with the ragged tear of weather damage. She had brought the cut section back to the company workshop. She had set it on Frida's desk. She had said, "Mom, this was cut, not damaged." Frida had looked at the cut section under magnification. She had agreed. Frida and Ingrid pulled the company's outage records for the previous 6 years. They cross-referenced every reported weather damage or vandalism outage against the Crowfoot Lineworks inspection schedule. Of the 83 outages classified as weather damage or vandalism between June of 2019 and February of 2025, 61 had been first reported by Crowfoot Lineworks crews during routine inspection. Of those 61, 57 had occurred on transmission line runs at least 1 mile from any populated area, on poles isolated from public road access, in locations where the copper conductor could be removed without immediate detection. The total length of replaced copper conductor across those 57 incidents was approximately 38,000 feet. At market copper prices over the 6-year period, the value of the removed copper conductor was approximately $2.3 million. Big Timber Electric and Power Company had been replacing the copper at our own expense, at customer expense through normal utility ratepayer recovery, because we had been reporting the outages to our insurance carrier as weather damage or vandalism. Our insurance carrier had been paying out partial reimbursements. The insurance reimbursements had been classified as Crowfoot Lineworks Emergency Inspection Deductible Reimbursement, because Crowfoot Lineworks had been first to report the outages. Renton Crowfoot had been receiving the deductible reimbursements directly under the contract Big Timber Electric and Power Company had signed in April of 2022. Frida and Ingrid had identified, in 3 days, a 6-year multi-million-dollar pattern of copper theft, insurance fraud, and utility infrastructure sabotage running through Crowfoot Lineworks, LLC. I called my attorney Casper Granger that Friday at 5:30. Casper Granger drove out to the ranch Saturday morning at 9. He read Frida's documentation. He read Ingrid's outage cross-reference. He read Rosine Pruitt's HOA budget folder. He set everything down. He said, "Orrin, this is a federal RICO case. Wire fraud, mail fraud, federal interference with utility infrastructure under Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1366, federal insurance fraud, federal conspiracy. The Montana United States Attorney's Office for the District of Montana will want this. Special Agent Aliska Helms at the FBI Helena Field Office runs rural utility infrastructure crimes. She has been hunting a Montana copper theft pattern for at least 4 years. I asked him to contact her. He told me he would. He also told me one more thing, Orrin. There is one other Big Timber Electric and Power Company customer you should contact, a man named Walton Hardesty. He owned a small ranch outside Reed Point in Stillwater County. He had a copper transmission line cut on his pasture in March of 2023. He filed a citizen complaint with Sweetgrass County Sheriff's Office at the time, alleging that the cut had been made deliberately by a Crowfoot Lineworks crew member he had personally observed on his property the day before the cut was reported. The complaint was closed for lack of corroborating evidence. Walton Hardesty has been waiting for someone to ask him about it for 2 years. And I drove out to Walton Hardesty's ranch outside Reed Point on Sunday afternoon at 3. He was 71, lifelong Montana cattleman. He had run cattle on the Hardesty Ranch since taking over from his father in 1981. He met me at his front porch with a paper cup of coffee. He listened to me for an hour. He set down his coffee. He said, "Mr. Osterman, I have been waiting 2 years for somebody to ask me about that cut. I would like to come to Big Timber with you tomorrow morning and tell whatever federal agent you want me to tell." I told him yes. Special Agent Aliska Helms at the FBI Helena Field Office opened the formal federal investigation on Tuesday, March 11th. She drove down to Big Timber the same day. She arrived at the Big Timber Electric and Power Company headquarters at 3 in the afternoon. She brought a federal investigative grand jury subpoena form, a paralegal, and a slim leather portfolio she had been issued at Quantico in 1998. She sat in our conference room with me, Frida, Casper Granger, and Roisin Pruitt for 4 hours. She read every document. She listened to every story. She watched the cut copper sample under magnification. She set her coffee down. She said, "Mr. Osterman, I have been working a Montana copper theft pattern across 4 counties since 2021. The pattern matches Crowfoot Lineworks inspection footprint with precision I had not been able to prove on circumstantial evidence alone. Your daughter's identification of the cable cutter's signature on the cut sample is the technical evidence I have been waiting for. Mrs. Pruitt's testimony on the HOA budget fraud is the predicate I have been waiting for." She continued, "I want to coordinate with Assistant United States Attorney Halstead Vermillion at the District of Montana office in Billings. I want to coordinate with the Montana State Patrol Commercial Crimes Unit. I want to coordinate with the Montana State Auditor's Office of Insurance Fraud. I want to file the federal indictment by mid-July." She said one more thing, "Mr. Osterman, the federal jurisdiction activates fully under Title 18, USC Section 1366, the moment a deliberate cut is made against active, live infrastructure that crosses state lines or affects interstate electrical commerce. Big Timber Electric and Power Company is part of the Western Interconnection Power Grid. Your transmission lines feed power that touches Wyoming, Idaho, and the Dakotas. The moment Renton Crowfoot's crew makes a cut on a live line, knowing the line is live and serving customers, the federal RICO case becomes immediate." I asked her how she knew Renton would make such a cut. She said, "Mr. Osterman, he has been making cuts for 6 years. He has been escalating in pattern. Mrs. Crowfoot's HOA has been writing letters about the lines for 48 months. The April Community Improvement Plan, filing your lawyer noted, is the predicate document. She is going to ask her husband to cut a section of overhead transmission feeder on the southern Osterman easement. He is going to comply. When he does, we will have the federal predicate." I asked her to coordinate with my son Keld at the SCADA desk. She did. Keld coordinated with Special Agent Helms over the next 4 months on the SCADA system's transmission line monitoring camera integration. The system had been operational on the southern Osterman easement since 2014, installed by my father after a windstorm had damaged a pole and we had not been able to dispatch a repair crew quickly because we had not had visual confirmation of the damaged location. The cameras were live. The cameras had been recording for 11 years. The cameras had also, Keld confirmed with Frida that April, recorded every prior Crowfoot Lineworks inspection visit to the southern Osterman easement over the previous 6 years. Britta Bjornson, our SCADA video review tech, spent 6 weeks reviewing the camera archive footage. She matched 23 previous Crowfoot Lineworks inspection visits to 23 subsequent weather damage outage reports. Renton Crowfoot had been physically present on Big Timber Electric and Power Company easements at the time of each of the 23 prior cuts. The federal indictment, by mid-July, would name Renton Crowfoot on 23 counts of federal utility infrastructure sabotage. Vivian Crowfoot would be named on conspiracy and HOA fraud counts under the parallel federal scheme. We were waiting on August 14th. By June of 2025, the federal investigation against Crowfoot Lineworks LLC and the Crooked Creek Estates HOA had assembled the following coordination structure. Special Agent Aliska Helms at the FBI Helena Field Office led the federal investigation. Her team included 2 federal investigators, 1 paralegal, and a bureau forensic accountant specializing in rural utility ratepayer fraud. Assistant United States Attorney Halstead Vermillion at the District of Montana office in Billings led federal prosecutorial coordination. He had drafted a 53-count federal indictment by mid-June. The indictment named Renton Crowfoot on 23 counts of utility sabotage, 11 counts of federal mail fraud, 4 counts of federal wire fraud, 2 counts of conspiracy, 4 counts of insurance fraud, and 1 count of obstruction. It named Vivian Crowfoot on 6 counts of conspiracy, HOA misappropriation, and witness intimidation. The indictment was sealed pending the August 14th predicate. Sergeant Inga Brimmer at the Montana State Patrol Commercial Crimes Unit led parallel state coordination. Her team had been mapping Crowfoot Lineworks' 4-county inspection footprint since April. She had identified 2 additional copper theft incidents outside our previous documentation. Montana State Auditor's Office of Insurance Fraud Investigator Ruel Trompson had been auditing the insurance reimbursement flow into Renton Crowfoot's personal accounts since May. Total insurance fraud exposure, approximately $740,000 across the 6-year period. Casper Granger at our company coordinated all civil exposure. Roshan Pruitt at Crooked Creek Estates coordinated the parallel HOA recall under Montana Code Annotated Section 35-2-422, the statute governing nonprofit corporation member-initiated officer removal. Roshan had quietly gathered the signatures of 38 Crooked Creek Estates members on the recall petition over the previous 6 weeks. She had not yet filed the petition. She would file it on the morning of August 14th, at the moment our SCADA system confirmed the predicate cut. The recall meeting was pre-scheduled for the evening of August 14th, at the Crooked Creek Estates clubhouse. Vivian Crowfoot did not know. On August 13th, Special Agent Helms drove down to Big Timber for the final coordination meeting. She sat in our SCADA control center with Keld for 2 hours, reviewing the camera feeds, the live transmission monitoring, the dispatch protocol, and the SCADA to FBI direct communication line that had been established the previous month. The plan was a coordinated 3-front operation, activating at the moment the predicate cut was made. Front 1. SCADA detection of the cut plus immediate FBI notification, plus live camera feed transmission to the FBI Helena field office. Front 2. Sweetgrass County Sheriff Birch Lassiter's deputies dispatched to the cut location within 15 minutes. Sweetgrass County Sheriff's deputies were federally deputized under a joint task force agreement signed in May. Front 3. Federal RICO indictment unsealed within 90 minutes of the cut. Simultaneous federal arrests at Renton Crowfoot's home in Big Timber. Vivian Crowfoot's Pearl White Lincoln Navigator at the Crooked Creek Estates HOA office, and at the Crowfoot Lineworks crew vehicle, wherever it happened to be at the moment of the cut. The Roshan Pruitt HOA recall petition filing would activate Front 4, Civil HOA member action, at the same hour. The Crooked Creek Estates Community Voice September issue, which Roshan had pre-drafted under a confidential agreement with my attorney Casper Granger, would activate Front 5, public newsletter publication of the entire scheme, within 2 weeks of the August 14th predicate. The September issue would be edited by Roshan Pruitt. It would publish the federal indictment. It would publish the resident victims by name. It would publish a court-ordered apology from Vivian Crowfoot. I sat at my kitchen table with Frida, Ingrid, Keld, and my father Bjorn on the evening of August 13th. My father was 84. He had retired from the company in 2015. He still drove out to the SCADA control center every Tuesday morning to read the previous week's outage reports. He listened to me walk through the August 14th coordination plan. He set down his coffee. He said, "Orrin, your grandfather strung the first line on the southern easement himself in 1948. He laid the conductor on the east-west run during the second week of June. He climbed a 38-foot pole at age 41 in a Montana summer storm to land the lugs. He told me, when he handed me the company in 1973, that the southern easement was the spine of the system. He told me to never let anyone touch it. He looked at me. Tomorrow, son, make him proud." In the 11 days between Special Agent Helms's August 13th meeting and the morning of August 14th, Vivian Crowfoot made 4 serious mistakes. The first arrived on Friday, August 8th, in a certified letter to my company's general counsel office. The letter, on Crooked Creek Estates HOA letterhead, formally requested that Big Timber Electric and Power Company relocate or remove the Southern Osterman easement transmission infrastructure within 30 days in order to comply with updated Crooked Creek Estates community visual standards. There was no recorded easement amendment giving the HOA authority to demand the relocation. I forwarded the letter to Casper Granger. He filed it with Special Agent Helms within 9 minutes. She replied, "That's the second predicate document. Add it to the racketeering count." The second mistake arrived on Saturday, August 9th, when Vivian Crowfoot drove the 4 miles from Crooked Creek Estates to the Osterman Ranch and parked her Pearl White Lincoln Navigator at the foot of my driveway. She did not come up. She walked the southern easement on foot for 47 minutes. She photographed every transmission pole, every conductor span, and every easement boundary marker. She uploaded the photographs to a shared folder she had labeled Crooked Creek Future Beautification on a Google Drive account that the FBI had been monitoring since July under a federal warrant. The folder included, alongside her August 9th photographs, a written job specification dated August 2nd titled Southern Easement Clearance, 6 spans, 3 poles. Estimated crew time, 4 hours. The job specification listed the contractor as Crowfoot Line Works, LLC. It listed the requested completion date as Thursday, August 14th. It listed the requested start time as 11 a.m. The third mistake arrived on Monday, August 11th, when Vivian Crowfoot called the Sweetgrass County Building Department to inquire about permitting requirements for residential subdivision visual enhancement projects involving the removal of overhead infrastructure. The building department official she spoke with, a 62-year-old man named Quentin Halverson, who had worked the desk for 31 years, told Vivian that overhead utility transmission infrastructure on a recorded utility easement could not be removed by any party other than the utility company that owned it, and that any unauthorized removal would constitute a federal felony under Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1366. Vivian hung up on Quentin Halverson at 12:17. Quentin Halverson filed an internal Sweetgrass County Building Department memorandum within 15 minutes. He sent a copy to Sweetgrass County Sheriff Birch Lassiter. Sheriff Lassiter forwarded the memorandum to Special Agent Helms within 2 hours. The fourth mistake arrived on Wednesday, August 13th. The evening before the predicate, when Vivian Crowfoot called her husband Renton at his Crowfoot Line Works office in downtown Big Timber. She told him the Thursday morning 11 a.m. job was on. She told him the southern easement clearance was authorized under HOA Community Improvement Directive 47. Directive 47 did not exist. The Crooked Creek Estates HOA had no Community Improvement Directive series. The call was captured on a federal Title III wiretap that Special Agent Helms had activated in July under a federal court order signed by Judge Vera Holmgard of the District of Montana. Renton Crowfoot agreed to the Thursday morning job. He dispatched his lead foreman, Walden Penhaligon, and a 4-person crew at 6 a.m. Thursday morning. The crew was scheduled to arrive on the southern Osterman easement at 10:45. The crew was scheduled to begin cutting at 11 a.m. The cut would activate the federal predicate. I was at my kitchen table at 6:30 Thursday morning with Frida, Ingrid, Keld, and my father Bjorn. My father was wearing his original 1973 Big Timber Electric and Power Company gold service pin on his shirt collar. He had not worn it publicly in 12 years. He set down his coffee. He said, "Son, the grid is hot today." I said, "Yes, sir, Dad. The grid is hot today." The Crowfoot Line Works crew vehicle, a 2021 Ford F450 with the Crowfoot Line Works LLC logo on the door, towing a 60-foot bucket lift, turned onto Crazy Mountain Lane at 10:37 Thursday morning. I watched it pass the front gate of the ranch from the SCADA control center monitor that had been mirrored to my company's main building. Keld had set up a remote SCADA station in our headquarters conference room so that Frida, Casper Granger, Special Agent Helms, and I could observe the predicate in real time. The crew parked at the southern easement at 10:43. Walden Penhaligon, the foreman, climbed out of the cab. He was 46. He had worked for Renton Crowfoot for 19 years. He had personally been on 21 of the 23 previous Crowfoot Line Works inspection visits Britta Bjornson had matched to subsequent cut incidents. He stood at the base of pole 42 on the southern easement. He looked up at the conductor's span. He took a sip from a thermos of coffee. He walked back to the cab. He pulled out a hydraulic cable cutter. He climbed into the bucket lift. His crew positioned the lift. The bucket rose 46 feet to the upper conductor. Walden Penhaligon unfolded the cable cutter. The conductor was a number 4/0 aluminum conductor, steel-reinforced primary phase carrying 19 amperes at 70,000 volts. Walden Penhaligon placed the cutter on the conductor at 11:45. He hesitated for 23 seconds. He looked toward Crooked Creek Estates to the south. He looked toward our Big Timber Electric and Power Company substation to the east. He closed the cutter at 11:47 and 12 seconds. The conductor severed at 11:47 and 14 seconds. The arc flash lasted 300 milliseconds and threw a 40-foot fireball of vaporized aluminum into the August Montana sky. The cut conductor swung free of the crossarm and dropped 28 feet to the southern easement ground, still energized at 70,000 volts for 16 seconds before our automatic protection relays cleared the line. The SCADA system at our control center detected the outage at 11:47 and 16 seconds. Keld, at the SCADA desk, said one sentence over our company two-way radio. He said, "Outage on the southern feeder, pole 42, live camera engaged. I was sitting at the remote SCADA station in our headquarters conference room with Frida, Casper Granger, and Special Agent Helms when Keld's voice came over the radio. The live camera feed loaded on the conference room monitor at 11:47 and 22 seconds. The four of us watched the next 30 seconds in silence. Special Agent Helms said one sentence. She said, "That's federal." She picked up her phone and dialed the FBI, Helena field office. By 11:48 and 40 seconds, the federal indictment had been formally unsealed by a USA Halstead Vermillion at his Billings office. By 11:49 and 10 seconds, federal arrest warrants had been transmitted electronically to every law enforcement agency in the Joint Task Force. By 11:49 and 30 seconds, our SCADA system had triggered an automatic dispatch of our nearest line repair crew, a four-person team led by my daughter Ingrid, from the Yellowstone substation 11 miles east of the cut location. The live camera feed showed Walden Penhaligon in the bucket lift, with the cable cutter still on the severed conductor. It showed his face clearly. It showed the Crowfoot Lineworks F450 with the visible LLC logo. The feed transmitted simultaneously to Special Agent Helms's FBI laptop, to Sergeant Inga Brimmer's Montana State Patrol Commercial Crimes Unit dispatch, and to Sweetgrass County Sheriff Birch Lassiter's office. 380 Big Timber Electric and Power Company customers lost power at 11:47 and 16 seconds, including all 120 homes in Crooked Creek Estates. Vivian Crowfoot's Pearl White Lincoln Navigator was parked at the Crooked Creek Estates HOA office. The office's air conditioning, lighting, and printer were on Big Timber Electric and Power Company service. The office went dark. Vivian walked out of the office at 11:49. She drove to the Southern Osterman easement. She arrived at the crew vehicle at 11:56. She got out of the Navigator. She walked to Walden Penhaligon, who had lowered the bucket and was on the ground. She said, "Walden, why is my house power out?" Walden Penhaligon, who had been a Crowfoot Lineworks foreman for 19 years, looked at the severed conductor on the ground beside his feet. He looked at Vivian Crowfoot. He said, "Mrs. Crowfoot, the line we just cut is the line that serves Crooked Creek." Vivian Crowfoot looked at the severed conductor. She looked at the Lincoln Navigator. She looked back at Walden Penhaligon. She said, "That cannot be right." At 12:04, two Sweetgrass County Sheriff's deputies arrived on the Southern Osterman easement. At 12:07, Sergeant Inga Brimmer of the Montana State Patrol Commercial Crimes Unit arrived. At 12:11, Special Agent Aliska Helms of the FBI Helena field office arrived with two federal investigators. At 12:14, AUSA Halstead Vermillion arrived from Billings with the unsealed federal indictment. The federal arrest warrants were served at 12:17. Walden Penhaligon was placed in federal custody at 12:19. Vivian Crowfoot was placed in federal custody at 12:21. The four crew members were placed in federal custody between 12:23 and 12:27. Brenton Crowfoot was arrested at the Crowfoot Lineworks office in downtown Big Timber at 12:24 by a parallel FBI team. By 12:35 Thursday afternoon, the Southern Osterman easement was an active federal crime scene with 11 federal, state, and county vehicles parked along Crazy Mountain Lane and 17 federal investigators photographing the severed conductor, the bucket lift, the Crowfoot Lineworks F450, and the hydraulic cable cutter. By 12:50, Big Timber Electric and Power Company had dispatched a repair crew to the southern feeder. The crew was led by my daughter, Ingrid. She climbed pole 42 at 1:06. She landed a new conductor splice at 3:45. Power was restored to all 380 Big Timber Electric and Power Company customers, including all 120 homes in Crooked Creek Estates, at 4:03 Thursday afternoon. The restoration took less than 4 hours. Vivian Crowfoot was, by 4:03, sitting in a federal detention cell in the Sweetgrass County Detention Facility on 6th Avenue South in Big Timber. She had not yet been informed that her HOA was simultaneously being recalled. Roshan Pruitt walked into the Crooked Creek Estates HOA office at 1:30 Thursday afternoon with the recall petition. She had collected 38 signatures over the previous 6 weeks. By the time the power had been restored at 4:03, she had collected an additional 21 signatures from Crooked Creek Estates residents who had read the FBI's public statement on the arrests and who had walked directly from their homes to the HOA office to sign. The total signatures at 4:30 Thursday afternoon, 59 of the 120 Crooked Creek Estates households, well above the simple majority required under Montana Code Annotated Section 35-2-422. The recall meeting was held at the Crooked Creek Estates Clubhouse at 7 p.m. Thursday evening. The clubhouse was full at 6:45. 81 of the 120 Crooked Creek Estates households were represented. Roshan Pruitt presided. She read the federal indictment. She read the 4-year Crowfoot Lineworks vegetation management fraud, $192,000 in fraudulent monthly billings. She read the 6-year copper theft pattern, $2.3 million in stolen copper. She read the $740,000 insurance fraud. She called the recall vote. The motion passed 81-0. Vivienne Crowfoot, in absentia from a federal detention cell, was recalled from the Crooked Creek Estates HOA presidency at 7:38. The Big Timber Tribune reporter Ailsa Whitstone, who had been in the back row of the clubhouse with a steno notebook, called me at 8:15 Thursday evening. She asked me one question. "Mr. Osterman, if you could say one thing to Mrs. Crowfoot tonight, what would it be?" I thought about it for a long second. I held up a printed copy of the November 1947 utility easement my grandfather Sverre Osterman had granted to Big Timber Electric and Power Company in exchange for a one-time consideration of $1. I held it where the Tribune photographer could see it. I said, "Mrs. Crowfoot, my grandfather strung the first line across this valley with his own 2 hands in the summer of 1948. He climbed a 38-foot pole in a Montana summer storm at age 41 to land the lugs on the southern feeder you cut today. He charged my grandfather $1 for the easement. He charged your community $5,000 per month for the power that flows through it. Your husband cut a line my grandfather charged me $1 to build. You should have asked the line who built it. I lowered the easement." Ailsa Whitstone ran the quote on the front page of the Friday morning Big Timber Tribune. The headline read, in a single line of 52-point type, "Power line was built for $1 in 1948. By Friday at noon, the Billings Gazette had picked up the story. By Friday at 3, the Bozeman Daily Chronicle had picked it up. By Friday at 6, the Helena Independent Record had picked it up. By Saturday morning, Montana Public Radio had aired a 23-minute piece on the federal indictment, the copper theft pattern, and the November 1947 easement that had built the line. By Sunday afternoon, the Associated Press had carried the story nationally. By Monday morning, the Wall Street Journal had run a 2,800-word feature on rural utility copper theft patterns nationwide, citing the Big Timber federal indictment as the largest single-incident copper theft prosecution in American rural utility history. The Journal reporter, a 41-year-old man named Otto Whitlow, who had been covering domestic infrastructure crime for 9 years, quoted me on the November 1947 easement and the $1 consideration. The Journal photograph that ran with the feature was a black and white image of my grandfather, Sverre Osterman, standing at the base of the 58-foot Yellowstone River pole in the summer of 1948, with the willow bark guideline still tied to his right wrist. My father had given the photograph to the Journal photographer at our company's Big Timber headquarters on Saturday afternoon. He had held the photograph in his hands for a long minute before handing it over. He had told the photographer that his father had asked him, in 1973, to make sure the photograph stayed with the company forever. He had told the photographer that the company was where the photograph belonged. The Journal returned the photograph to my father by overnight courier the following Tuesday. He kept it on his nightstand for the rest of his life. The Crooked Creek Estates Community Voice September issue went to press on Tuesday, August 19th. Roshan Pruitt edited the issue herself. Page 1 carried the federal indictment. Page 2 carried Vivienne Crowfoot's court-ordered apology letter. The apology letter ran 411 words. It was signed by Vivienne Crowfoot in her own handwriting. The newsletter was mailed to all 120 Crooked Creek Estates households on September 1st. Renton Crowfoot pleaded guilty in February to 34 federal counts spanning federal utility infrastructure sabotage under Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1366, federal mail fraud, federal wire fraud, federal insurance fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and obstruction. 14 years federal ATF-CI Sheridan, plus $2.7 million in restitution. Vivienne Crowfoot pleaded guilty in April to 9 federal counts spanning conspiracy, HOA misappropriation, federal mail fraud, and witness intimidation. 4 years federal at FCI Dublin, plus $340,000 in restitution. Walden Penhaligon pleaded guilty in March under a cooperation agreement to 4 counts of utility sabotage and 1 count of conspiracy, 5 years federal. He cooperated fully with the federal investigation, including identifying 19 previous Crowfoot Line Works crew members who had participated in copper theft incidents at various times over the 6-year period. The remaining 4 crew members each pleaded guilty to single counts of utility sabotage between April and June. Sentences ranged from 18 months to 3 years federal. Crowfoot Line Works, LLC, was dissolved by court order. The remaining corporate assets, approximately $1.4 million, were placed in court-supervised receivership for distribution to victim restitution. The Crooked Creek Estates HOA was reconstituted in October under new bylaws. The new board's first chair was Roisin Pruitt. The new bylaws capped HOA dues at $58 per month and prohibited any board member or board member's spouse from operating any LLC providing services to the HOA. The 120 Crooked Creek Estates households received refunds averaging approximately $1,600 per household for the fraudulent vegetation management fees Vivian Crowfoot had authorized. The funds came from the dissolved Crowfoot Line Works LLC receivership. Walton Hardesty received federal restitution of $47,000 in May for the March 2023 copper theft on his Reed Point pasture. He drove to Helena to accept the restitution check from a USA Halstead Vermilion in person. He wore the same cattle hat he had worn the day he had filed the original citizen complaint with Sweetgrass County Sheriff in March of 2023. Big Timber Electric and Power Company received $640,000 in federal restitution from the dissolved Crowfoot Line Works assets for the company's portion of the customer ratepayer recovery costs. I established the Sverre Osterman Memorial Rural Utility Apprenticeship Fund in November of 2025. The fund provides paid 2-year journeyman lineman apprenticeships, SCADA operations training, and rural utility engineering certifications for first-generation Montana students entering the rural electric trades. Casper Granger serves as the fund's pro bono general counsel. Roisin Pruitt sits on the fund's board. The fund's master instructor is my daughter Ingrid Osterman. The first apprentice the fund placed was an 18-year-old young man named Hjalmar Gunderson from Carbon County, whose grandfather had been a Montana Power Company lineman from 1958 to 1992. He started in the Big Timber Electric and Power Company line crews in January of 2026. He climbed his first transmission pole at age 18. My father, Bjorn Osterman, remained CEO Emeritus through the spring of 2026. He drove out to the SCADA Control Center every Tuesday morning to read the previous week's outage reports, until he passed in his sleep on a Thursday night in April. He was 85. The 1973 gold service pin he had worn the morning of August 14th was buried with him. Frida and Ingrid and Kjeld continue to run the company alongside me. Ingrid has expressed interest in the CEO role on a 5-year horizon. I have told her she will be ready. The Southern Osterman easement is intact. The new conductor splice Ingrid landed at pole 42 on the afternoon of August 14th. 2025, has carried 70,000 volts continuously through every Montana winter since. Last night, Frida and I drove the company truck, a 1989 Chevrolet C30 utility bed my father had bought new, to a steakhouse in Big Timber called the Grand Hotel. We ate prime rib and creamed corn at a corner booth. The jukebox played George Strait. We drove home with the windows down. The April Montana evening was cool. A pair of sandhill cranes called overhead. I'm Orrin Osterman. That was my grandfather's company. That was my wife's audit. That was my daughter's splice. That was the easement.